Some families have secrets that fester for decades. Mine had a father who believed shame was the best teacher. The night he stood up at Thanksgiving dinner, pointed his finger at me, and declared I was no longer his child in front of 20 relatives, he thought he was delivering the final blow. He thought he'd won. But what my father didn't know is that I'd been collecting every cruel word, every humiliation, every moment he'd torn me down, and I'd been waiting for the perfect moment to show him exactly what happens when you underestimate the child you tried to destroy. When my revenge finally came, it didn't just change our family forever, it changed everything. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to hear how the story ends, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from right now. My name is Elena, and I learned early that love in my family came with conditions. My father, Richard, was the kind of man who commanded every room he walked into. 6 feet tall, silver-haired, with a voice that could silence a crowd or reduce you to nothing with just a few words. He was a successful lawyer, respected in our small town, and he never let any of us forget it. Growing up in the Morrison household meant walking on eggshells every single day. My older brother Jake could do no wrong. He was Dad's golden boy, following in his footsteps to law school, playing football in high school, everything Dad had dreamed of. But me? I was the disappointment he never bothered to hide. Every Thanksgiving was Dad's annual performance. He'd invite extended family, colleagues, neighbors, anyone who could witness his perfect family facade. He'd stand at the head of our dining room table like a king holding court, making toasts about success, about family values, about how proud he was of his children. Plural, but his eyes would skip right over me. I spent years trying to earn his approval. I graduated valedictorian. He said grades don't matter if you don't have ambition. I got accepted to Columbia for journalism. He called it a hobby degree. I won state championships in debate. He told people his son was the real athlete in the family. Nothing was ever enough. The breaking point came when I was 22. I'd been dating Marcus for 2 years, and we'd gotten engaged. Marcus was everything Dad claimed to want for me: stable job, good family, respectful. But Marcus was black, and that's when I saw who my father really was underneath all that polished exterior. Dad didn't just disapprove. He threatened to cut me off financially. He told me I was destroying the family reputation. He said things I won't repeat here, things that showed me the man I'd been desperately trying to please was someone I didn't even recognize. But here's what Dad never knew about his disappointing daughter. I'd inherited his attention to detail. I'd been keeping records since I was 16. Every cruel comment, every broken promise, every time he'd humiliated me in front of others. I had a file on my laptop with dates, witnesses, even some recordings from family gatherings. I told myself it was for my own healing, to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that these things really happened. What I didn't realize yet was that I was building the perfect weapon. That Thanksgiving dinner started like every other one. Dad at the head of the table, surrounded by his audience. My aunts, uncles, cousins, even some of his law firm partners were there. 23 people total. I remember because I counted them while I sat there, watching him hold court. Marcus was beside me, his hand gently squeezing mine under the table. We decided that night would be the night we'd announce our engagement. I was 24, financially independent from my journalism job, and I thought maybe, just maybe, Dad would finally see me as an adult worthy of respect. The dinner was going well. Dad was in his element, telling stories about his latest courtroom victories, asking Jake about law school, praising Mom's cooking. I actually started to relax. Maybe this year would be different. Then Uncle Robert asked about my love life. "Elena, you've been awfully quiet. Are you seeing anyone special?" I felt Marcus's hand tighten around mine. This was it. Our moment. I stood up, my heart pounding, and said actually yes. I'd like everyone to meet Marcus, my fiancé. I held up my left hand, showing off the simple but beautiful ring Marcus had given me just 2 weeks earlier. The table went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, the kind where you can feel the air getting thick and dangerous. I looked at Dad's face and watched it change from confusion to something much worse. Fiancé. Dad's voice was ice cold. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You mean to tell me you got engaged without asking my permission? Dad, I'm 24. I don't need. You don't need what? My approval. My blessing. He was getting louder now, and I could see our relatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. You think you can just bring some random man into my house, to my table, and announce you're marrying him? Marcus squeezed my hand again, and I saw Dad's eyes lock onto our joined hands. That's when his expression shifted to pure disgust. This is who you chose? This is the man you think is worthy of the Morrison name? The way he said this made my stomach turn. I raised you better than this, Elena. I gave you every opportunity, every advantage, and this is how you repay me? The entire table was staring now. My cousins looked mortified. Aunt Linda was studying her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Mom was gripping her wine glass, so tight I thought it might shatter. Dad, please. No. He slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. I will not watch you destroy everything our family stands for. I will not watch you throw away your future for some. He looked directly at Marcus, and I saw something in my father's eyes I'd never seen before. Pure hatred. Marcus started to stand up, but Dad held up his hand. Don't say a word. You've done enough damage just by being here. I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes, but I wasn't going to cry. Not in front of everyone. Dad, you don't even know him. If you just... Get out. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? I said get out. Both of you. You want to make adult decisions without consulting your family? Then you can live with the consequences as an adult. You are no longer welcome in this house. You are no longer my daughter. The silence in that dining room was deafening. 23 people watching my father disown me over Thanksgiving dinner. My own mother didn't say a word. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. My little cousin Emma, only 8 years old, started crying. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, looking at the man who had raised me. The man I'd spent my entire life trying to please. The man who had just told me I was dead to him in front of our entire family. Marcus stood up beside me, his voice calm and dignified. Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry you feel this way. Elena is an amazing woman and I love her. I hope someday you'll see that. Dad's response was to turn his back on us completely. I walked out of that house with whatever dignity I had left. But as I reached the front door, I turned back and looked at that dining room one more time. At Dad standing there like some kind of king who just banished a traitor. At my family sitting in stunned silence around the table. That's when I made him a promise he couldn't hear but would definitely feel. That was the last time you'll ever embarrass me, Dad. The very last time. The first year after that dinner was the hardest of my life. Marcus and I moved 3 states away, got married in a small courthouse ceremony with just his family there. I threw myself into my career, working 16-hour days at a regional newspaper, climbing from junior reporter to investigative journalist faster than anyone expected. But every night, I'd open that file on my laptop, the one with all Dad's cruelties documented over the years. I'd read through it, adding new memories, new details. What started as therapy was becoming something else entirely. Marcus would find me at my desk at 2 a.m, staring at that screen. Elena, you need to let this go, he'd say. We have a good life. We're happy. Don't let him poison that. But I couldn't let it go. Every holiday season, when I'd see other families posting happy Thanksgiving photos on social media, that wound would rip open again. My own brother Jake never called, never reached out. He was too busy being the perfect son, following Dad's blueprint for success. That's when I started paying attention to Dad's law firm more closely. Morrison and Associates was the biggest firm in our hometown, and Dad loved to brag about their high-profile clients. Corporate law, he always said, was where the real money was. But investigative journalism had taught me something valuable, how to dig deeper than the surface. I started small. Public records, court filings, business registrations. At first, it was just curiosity. I wanted to understand the empire Dad was so proud of, the reputation he'd chosen over his own daughter. What I found was interesting. Morrison and Associates represented several major developers who've been buying up land around our hometown for the past 5 years. Nothing illegal about that, but the pattern was unusual. They were paying well above market value for properties, sometimes to families who'd been struggling financially. Then I found the first real thread. 3 families had sold their generational farms to these developers after receiving letters from Morrison and Associates about potential legal complications with their property titles. Letters that scared elderly farmers into quick sales at prices way below what their land was actually worth. I spent months verifying every detail. I interviewed the families, pulled county records, traced the money. What I discovered was a systematic scheme to acquire valuable land through legal intimidation. Not technically illegal, but definitely unethical. The kind of thing that would destroy a lawyer's reputation if it became public. But I needed more than just unethical behavior. I needed something that would hit Dad where it really hurt. That's when I remembered Grandpa Morrison's will. Dad's father had been old school, traditional in ways that even Dad had to respect. When he died 8 years ago, he left the family's original property, 200 acres of prime land just outside town, to be divided equally between all his grandchildren. Not just Jake and me, but our cousins too. It was supposed to be held in trust until the youngest grandchild turned 25. Little Emma, the one who cried at that Thanksgiving dinner, had just turned 23. I started digging into the trust documents, and that's when I found it. Dad had been using his position as executor to make management decisions about the property. He'd been leasing sections to his developer clients, collecting rent payments that should have been held in trust for us grandchildren. But it got worse. I found lease agreements that showed Dad was preparing to sell the entire property to his biggest client, the same developer who'd been intimidating families into cheap sales. The sale was scheduled to go through just 2 days after Emma's 25th birthday, which meant the trust would dissolve, and Dad could claim he had the authority to sell as the oldest surviving family member. The property was worth $3.7 million. Dad was selling it for $1.2 million, with a $200,000 consultation fee going directly to Morrison and Associates. He was stealing from his own grandchildren, including the little girl who'd cried when he disowned me. I had everything I needed: financial records, lease agreements, correspondence with the developers. Enough evidence to not only expose the land scheme, but also to tie it directly to the systematic intimidation of elderly families throughout the county. But timing was everything. I had to wait for the perfect moment, when the maximum number of people would witness Dad's downfall, when his humiliation would be as public and devastating as mine had been. I just had to wait for the right Thanksgiving. And Emma's 25th birthday was going to be on Thanksgiving Day this year. The pieces were finally falling into place. 5 years. 5 years since that humiliating dinner, and now it was time. I'd spent months orchestrating every detail. The first step was getting back into that house, and for that I needed an ally. Emma had just turned 25 on November 15th, and when I reached out to wish her happy birthday, she broke down crying on the phone. "I miss you so much, Elena," she sobbed. "I never understood why Uncle Richard made you leave. Mom always changes the subject when I ask about you." Emma was my way in. Sweet, naive Emma, who had no idea her beloved Uncle Richard had been stealing her inheritance for years. I told her I'd love to see her on Thanksgiving, that I missed the family terribly. She promised to convince everyone to let me come. But I wasn't waiting for permission. I hired a private investigator to confirm Dad would be having his usual grand Thanksgiving performance. Sure enough, 28 people were expected this year. Extended family, law firm partners, even the mayor. Perfect. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I put the first part of my plan into motion. I'd spent months building relationships with 3 journalists from the state's largest newspaper, colleagues who specialized in corruption and fraud. I gave them everything. Every document, every financial record, every interview with the families Dad had intimidated. This is Pulitzer-level stuff, Sarah Chen, the lead investigative reporter, told me. But are you sure you want us to run it? This will destroy your father completely. I'm counting on it, I replied. But I need you to hold the story until Friday morning. I want one more Thanksgiving dinner with my family first. Wednesday afternoon, I drove the 6 hours back to my hometown. I checked into a hotel and spent the evening making final preparations. Phone calls to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, email confirmations with the State Bar Association, a meeting with a forensic accountant who'd helped the families Dad had cheated recover their losses. Thursday morning, I put on my best dress, the same navy blue one I'd worn to my college graduation, the one Dad had barely acknowledged. I drove to the house I'd grown up in, the house I'd been banished from 5 years earlier. I could hear the laughter and conversation from the front yard. Through the window, I saw the same scene as always, Dad at the head of the table, gesturing grandly while everyone hung on his words. Jake was there with his new wife. Mom was bustling around, making sure everyone's wine glass stayed full. Emma was sitting between 2 cousins, laughing at something Dad had said. I walked up to the front door and knocked. The conversation stopped. I could hear footsteps, and then Mom opened the door. Her face went white. "Elena," she whispered. "What are you? How did you?" "Hi, Mom. I missed you." I stepped past her into the foyer. The entire dining room turned to stare at me. 28 faces showing various degrees of shock, confusion, and in Dad's case, fury. "What the hell are you doing here?" Dad's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "I came for Thanksgiving dinner," I said, walking into the dining room like I owned the place. "Families should be together on Thanksgiving, don't you think?" Emma jumped up from her chair and ran to hug me. "Elena, I can't believe you're here." "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I whispered in her ear. "Your real birthday present is coming soon." Dad stood up slowly, his face dark with rage. "You are not welcome here. I made that clear 5 years ago." "Oh, but I think I am welcome," I said, pulling out my phone. "In fact, I think everyone here is going to be very interested in what I have to share." "Elena, please," Mom said quietly. "Don't cause a scene." "A scene?" I laughed. "Mom, Dad caused a scene 5 years ago when he disowned me in front of everyone. I'm just here to return the favor." I opened the email app on my phone and held it up so the screen was visible. "So, I've been doing some interesting reading lately. Did you all know that Dad here has been managing a family trust for the past 8 years? Grandpa Morrison's land trust, to be specific." The room was dead silent now. I saw several cousins exchange glances. Emma looked confused. "Elena, stop," Jake said. "Whatever you think you know." "Oh, I don't think, Jake. I know. I know that Dad has been collecting rent payments from that land for 8 years. Payments that were supposed to be held in trust for all of us grandchildren." I scrolled through my phone. I know he's been leasing sections to Hartwell Development, coincidentally, one of his biggest clients. Dad's face was starting to lose color. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I pulled up a photo of a lease agreement. "This is your signature, isn't it, Dad? Leasing Grandpa's north pasture to Hartwell for $15,000 a month. That's $180,000 a year that should have been going into the trust." Uncle Robert leaned forward in his chair. "Richard, is this true?" It's complicated," Dad stammered. "The trust required active management. I was protecting the property value. By selling it," I interrupted. Because that's the really interesting part. I scrolled to another document. Sale agreement, dated November 27th, 3 days from now. The entire property, all 200 acres, sold to Hartwell Development for $1.2 million. Emma gasped. Uncle Richard, that land is worth way more than that. $3.7 million, to be exact, I said. But don't worry, Emma. Dad negotiated a nice consultation fee for himself. $200,000, plus a permanent position on Hartwell's board of directors. The whispers started then. Family members turning to each other, voices rising in confusion and anger. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, calculating what their share of that land should be worth. There's more, I said, my voice carrying over the noise. Dad, tell everyone about the Hendricks family. Remember them? Elderly couple, own the farm next to Hartwell's big development project? Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. No. Let me refresh your memory. Your law firm sent them a letter claiming there were title irregularities with their property. Scared them so badly, they sold their 100-acre farm for $30,000 below market value. To Hartwell Development, of course. That was legitimate legal advice. Was it legal advice when you did the same thing to the Rodriguez family? The Patels? The Johnsons? I was walking around the table now, making eye contact with each person. 12 families, Dad. 12 families who got frightening letters from Morrison and Associates, telling them they might lose their land in legal battles they couldn't afford. 12 families who sold to your clients for hundreds of thousands, less than their property was worth. The mayor, one of Dad's dinner guests, was looking very uncomfortable. Richard, these are some serious accusations. They're not accusations, I said. They're facts. And tomorrow morning, everyone in the state is going to read about them in the Tribune. Sarachin has been working on this story for months. Dad finally found his voice. You vindictive little. Careful, Dad, I warned. There are children present. Wouldn't want to show everyone what you're really like. That's when Jake stood up. Elena, that's enough. Even if what you're saying is true. It is true, Emma said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was staring at Dad with tears in her eyes. Uncle Richard, is it true? Did you steal from us? Dad looked at his youngest niece, the little girl he'd bounced on his knee, the one who still sent him homemade birthday cards. Emma, sweetheart, it's not that simple. Did you steal from us? She asked again, louder this time. The silence stretched on, and on, and on. Finally, Uncle Robert stood up. I think we need to call a lawyer. Oh, you'll need more than a lawyer, I said. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit has already opened an investigation. The State Bar Association is reviewing Dad's license. And I've arranged for a forensic accountant to help all the families he cheated recover their losses. That's when Dad finally exploded. You destroyed everything. He screamed at me. My reputation, my practice, my family. All because you couldn't handle being told the truth 5 years ago. The truth? I laughed. Dad, the truth is that you're a thief and a fraud. The truth is that you built your precious reputation by intimidating vulnerable families and stealing from your own grandchildren. The truth is that you chose money over family, just like you chose racism over your daughter. The room erupted. Family members were shouting questions at Dad, demanding answers. The mayor was making phone calls. Mom was crying. Emma was demanding to know how much money Dad had stolen from her inheritance. And Dad was standing there, in the middle of it all, watching his perfect world crumble around him. Just like he'd watched me stand there 5 years ago when he destroyed my world in front of everyone. How does it feel, Dad? I asked him quietly, my voice somehow carrying over all the chaos. How does it feel to have everyone you care about see who you really are? He looked at me with pure hatred. You've destroyed everything. No, I said. I just told the truth. The same truth you taught me 5 years ago. Actions have consequences. You chose to be a criminal. You chose to steal from your own family. You chose to destroy innocent people's lives for profit. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Oh, and Dad? That consultation fee you were supposed to get from Hartwell? They terminated their contract with your firm this morning. Seems they don't want to be associated with fraud and elder abuse. I paused at the front door and looked back one more time. 20 people, all staring at the man who'd just been exposed as a thief and a fraud. The man who taught me that family meant nothing compared to reputation. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, I said. I finally have something to be grateful for. The aftermath was more brutal than even I had imagined. The Tribune article ran Friday morning with the headline prominent attorney accused of elder fraud, family trust theft. By noon, it had been picked up by 3 major news networks. Dad's face was plastered across every local news station as the corrupt lawyer who preyed on vulnerable families. The FBI raids came on Monday. They seized every computer, every file cabinet, every financial record from Morrison and Associates. Dad's law partners held an emergency meeting and voted to remove his name from the firm by Tuesday. Morrison and Associates became Blackstone and Associates overnight, and they issued a public statement calling Dad's actions a betrayal of everything our profession stands for. But that was just the beginning. The State Bar Association suspended Dad's license within the week. Not temporary suspension, complete revocation pending criminal investigation. 32 years of building his legal career gone in 7 days. The financial reckoning was savage. The forensic accountant I'd hired discovered that Dad had stolen nearly $400,000 from the family trust over 8 years. But the real devastation came when all 12 families he defrauded filed a class action lawsuit. Their damages totaled $2.3 million, and since Dad had used his law firm to commit the fraud, his malpractice insurance wouldn't cover intentional criminal acts. He lost everything. The big house with the mahogany dining room table where he'd held court for decades, sold to pay legal fees. His luxury cars, his country club membership, his investment portfolio, all liquidated to cover the lawsuits. Mom filed for divorce 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, claiming she had no idea about his criminal activities. Smart woman, protecting herself from his debts. The criminal charges came in January. Wire fraud, elder abuse, breach of fiduciary duty, racketeering. The prosecutors threw everything at him. His bail was set at $500,000, money he no longer had. Jake, his precious golden boy, refused to help. I can't be associated with this, he told the local paper. I have my own career to think about. Dad spent 6 weeks in county jail before Uncle Robert finally posted bail, and only because Grandma Morrison begged him to. But even Uncle Robert made it clear this was a one-time act of mercy, nothing more. The preliminary hearing was a massacre. The prosecution had everything: financial records, recorded phone calls with scared elderly victims, email chains showing Dad coordinating the land grab scheme. His defense attorney, a public defender since he couldn't afford private counsel anymore, basically advised him to take a plea deal. But here's the thing about narcissists like my father. Even when they're caught red-handed, they can't admit they were wrong. He refused the plea deal, insisting he was being persecuted by vindictive family members and ambitious prosecutors looking for headlines. So we went to trial. 3 months of testimony, where victim after victim took the stand to describe how Dad's legal threats had terrorized them into selling their family land for pennies on the dollar. Elderly farmers crying as they described losing property that had been in their families for generations because they were afraid of legal bills they couldn't afford. Emma testified about the trust fund, how she'd been counting on that inheritance to pay for graduate school, how she trusted her Uncle Richard to protect what her grandfather left for her. She cried on the stand, and I watched Dad's face remain stone cold throughout her entire testimony. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison. 12 years for a man who was 63 years old. He'd be 75 when he got out, assuming he lived that long. His legal career was over. His reputation was destroyed. His family had abandoned him. His fortune was gone. But you know what the most brutal part was? The thing that finally broke him completely? It happened during the victim impact statements at sentencing. Mrs. Rodriguez, the 80-year-old woman whose farm Dad had helped steal, stood up with her walker and looked directly at him. "My husband and I worked that land for 50 years, she said in her shaky voice. "We were going to leave it to our grandchildren. You made us so scared with your legal papers that we sold it for almost nothing. My husband died last month, Mr. Morrison. He died thinking he'd failed his family because we lost the farm. I want you to know that every night for the rest of your miserable life." That's when Dad finally broke. He started sobbing right there in the courtroom, these ugly, gasping sobs that echoed off the walls. The man who had commanded respect and fear for decades was crying like a child in front of everyone. The bailiffs had to help him to his feet when court was adjourned. But here's what really surprised me, how the family reacted to all this. Emma calls me every week now. She got into graduate school using a loan, and she says she's proud to be doing it on her own. "Uncle Richard taught me something important," she told me. "He taught me the difference between earning something and stealing it." Uncle Robert reached out 6 months after the trial. He apologized for not standing up for me at that Thanksgiving dinner 5 years ago. "I knew Richard could be harsh," he said, "but I never imagined he was capable of this level of cruelty and greed." Even some of my cousins started reaching out, asking about my life, wanting to rebuild relationships that Dad had effectively severed when he banished me. They'd grown up thinking I was the problem, the disappointment, the black sheep. Now they realized they'd been manipulated by a master manipulator. Jake, though? Jake was a different story. He showed up at my apartment 8 months after Dad's sentencing. He looked terrible, hollow-eyed, thin, like he hadn't been sleeping. He sat in my living room and stared at his hands for a long time before speaking. "I keep thinking about that night," he finally said. "When Dad threw you out, I knew it was wrong. I knew he was being cruel and racist and horrible. But I didn't say anything because I was scared he'd turn on me too." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I was a coward, Elena. I watched my father destroy my sister because I was too afraid of losing his approval. And now look what happened. He was a monster all along, and I helped him by staying silent." Jake broke down completely then, crying harder than I'd ever seen him cry. He ruined so many lives. Those families, Emma's future, your relationship with Marcus, everything. And I just sat there and let it happen because I wanted to be his perfect son. I didn't forgive him that day. Honestly, I'm still not sure I have. But I understood something about Jake that I'd never seen before. He was as much Dad's victim as I was, just in a different way. Dad had turned his golden boy into a coward who was too afraid to stand up for what was right. As for Dad himself, he tried to write me letters from prison. 3 letters in his first year, all following the same pattern. First, he tried to justify his actions, claiming he was protecting family assets or making sound business decisions. Then he'd blame me for his downfall, saying I'd destroyed an innocent man out of spite. Finally, he'd make some pathetic attempt at reconciliation, saying he missed me and wanted to rebuild our relationship. I burned all 3 letters without responding. The 4th letter was different. It came 2 years into his sentence, and it was just 2 lines. "You won, Elena. I hope destroying me was worth it." I wrote him back exactly once. My response was even shorter. "I didn't destroy you, Dad. I just told the truth. You destroyed yourself the moment you chose money over family. People ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to him, if I regret exposing him, sending him to prison, ruining his life. The answer is complicated. I don't regret stopping him from hurting more families. I don't regret getting Emma and my cousins the inheritance they deserved. I don't regret exposing a criminal who was using his position to prey on vulnerable people. But do I regret that it had to be me who brought him down? Do I regret that I had to destroy my own father to protect everyone else he was hurting? Sometimes, in quiet moments, I do. But then I remember Mrs. Rodriguez and her husband. I remember the 12 families who lost their generational land because they were scared of Dad's legal threats. I remember Emma crying at that dinner table, and all the years I spent thinking I wasn't good enough for my own father's love. The truth is, Dad made his choices long before that Thanksgiving dinner. He chose greed over honesty. He chose intimidation over integrity. He chose racism over his own daughter. I didn't destroy him. I just held up a mirror and showed the world who he really was underneath all that polish and charm. Marcus and I are doing well now. We bought a house. We're talking about starting a family. I got promoted to senior investigative journalist, and I've won 2 state awards for my reporting on corruption in small-town legal systems. Turns out that exposing my own father's crimes gave me a reputation as someone who won't back down from powerful people, no matter who they are. I learned something important through all of this. Family isn't about blood. It's not about shared DNA or last names or holiday traditions. Family is about the people who stand by you when things get difficult. It's about the people who see you for who you really are and love you anyway. Marcus is my family. Emma is my family. The colleagues who helped me investigate Dad's crimes are my family. Even some of my cousins and Uncle Robert have become family again, now that we're not under Dad's toxic influence. As for the man who raised me, the man whose approval I craved for 24 years, he's serving 12 years in federal prison, and honestly, that's exactly where he belongs. Sometimes people get what they deserve. Sometimes justice actually works. And sometimes the child you underestimate grows up to be the one who brings you down. That's the lesson Dad never learned, right up until the end. So there you have it. The man who disowned me at Thanksgiving dinner because of his racism and pride ended up losing everything: his career, his freedom, his family, and his fortune. 12 years in federal prison for the crimes he committed while building his precious reputation. He taught me that actions have consequences. I just made sure he learned that lesson too. So what do you think? Was I wrong for taking it this far, or did Dad get exactly what he deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.